Hello, I'm Jenya DeLima. Welcome to Writing and Editing, the author-focused podcast that takes a whole person approach to everything related to both writing and editing. After you've crafted your perfect opening line, how do you keep the reader engaged and also maintain their interest and the story's momentum? One might say it comes down to great and powerful storytelling, but what makes a story great? Enter emotion and dialogue, which give our characters personality and life and help pull readers into their world. Here to explain how to successfully add both to your manuscript is esteemed editor, poet, and African Academy Award-winning documentary filmmaker Daniel Roth. Well, I'm so pleased to have you here today.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate it. Where to begin? My goodness, I've read thousands of movie scripts and thousands of books. And so it's kind of hard to boil it down to one simple answer, but I'll do my best. Um, I believe that being reductive is a good thing. There are a lot of people who don't agree with it, but I don't care. You need to be able to make sense to people.
Mhm.
Let me back up. The relationship between the writer and the reader is something that's not really talked about. At least I'm not aware of it. And I think it's a profound relationship and it really affects everything because you, the writer, are asking the reader to trust you and to come along with you for a ride of some sort.
Mhm.
Um, every book is different. Every book has a different point, if you will, to it. But emotions and dialogue are what make us human. I
Yeah.
mean, forgetting about the book for a second, we are creatures of emotion and we convey emotion not only, but often through dialogue. And some of the advice that I give a writer is a lot of people write dialogue as if it was the same person speaking,
Ah,
and it's
yes.
not. And so I suggest to writers to either read their dialogue out loud so they can hear it, or better yet, have someone else read the dialogue to you
Oh,
so you can
right.
listen to it. Because dialogue is music. Dialogue is, I mean, I don't mean that literally, but it's a form of music. We communicate through many, many means. And dialogue is really an important one of them. Very often a writer will kind of use the same voice for
Yes.
multiple people, and it just doesn't work. You've got to be able to give the reader credibility. One of the things that I talk about often with all my writers was what I call the suspension of disbelief,
Yes.
and it's a critical part of the relationship between the writer and the reader because I have certainly walked out of many a movie in my life and closed many a book in my life. But I would tell you that all good writing in one way or another boils down to establishing a conflict and creating a resolution. That's the circulatory system of a heartbeat of any book. There's got to be some sort of conflict. You, the reader, have got to be willing to like or at least be intrigued by, you don't have to like your characters, but you've got to want to know what happens to them. So I would say emotion is a difficult thing to convey. It's really about the credibility of the characters and credibility of the situation. So those are really important parts of any kind of writing.
Mhm.
I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, and I was also hoping you could share some of your very impressive background with us because I think that will help listeners understand where this knowledge and perspective came from.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but I'm just going to tell you the truth.
I've read your background, so I already know whatever you're going to say is going to be anything just
Well,
whole and true.
many years ago, I came in. I won first place in the senior scholastic creative writing contest. I came in first place for poetry. And I was in high school at the time. And that pretty much set my course in that direction. I really only I know about words, I know about language. I don't really know much about anything else. But I went to University of Wisconsin. Also won a poetry contest there. I graduated. I went to Columbia Teachers College on a fellowship. I got my master's degree in English, and I started working for an independent publishing company. And this was in the era of audio publishing. This was when books on tape were a novelty, and they were really looked at as something quote unquote for the blind. That's how the industry started. It was not a popular. It wasn't a consumer product, and somebody hired me to create what we called a magazette, which is a combination of two words, a magazine and an audio cassette. And it was called the American Arts Project. And we got a distribution deal in one of the big chains. And I produced, I don't know, about a dozen or so issues. Again, I'm using magazine terminology. That led me to be hired by another company called Newman, N-E-W-M-A-N Communications. And they really opened up the industry. They got just a national distribution deal with, I remember Walden with that. And so I was hired. They were only a distributor at the time, but they wanted to get into publishing. So they hired me away from this independent project that I was doing. And I became the editorial director of Newman Communications. And this was really the starting point, the commercial starting point of the audio industry. And based on the success of this company, Newman Communications, all the major publishers like Simon & Schuster, like Random House, like HarperCollins, all of them decided that they needed to get into this new fledgling industry. And so I was hired away from Newman Communications by Simon & Schuster, and I was hired as editorial director of Simon & Schuster Audio.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted, I don't remember, 2 or 3 years. And then I was promoted to publisher of the division. And it was very successful. The division on a percentage basis was the most successful basis within Simon & Schuster.
Oh, amazing.
It was, and we won 2 Grammy Awards, and it was an exciting time. It was brand new, it was fledgling, and it was. I spent 5 years running that division, and eventually, for personal reasons, I just didn't feel like there was a place for me to grow to. So because I was well known in the industry, I got a job as vice president, reporting directly to the chairman of HarperCollins. I came up with a term that I thought at the time was great. It was the management and migration of copyright. That I looked at these gigantic conglomerates. Simon & Schuster was part of at the time, was Golden Western, and then it went through iterations. But I thought, I'm not attached to the final form. I'm attached to the content. The content can take different forms. So, and a perfect example of that is a book going into the audio. I mean, you're talking about the content. You're talking about the actual words on a page. Well, they don't have to be on a page. Anyway, I've been doing this my whole life. I left HarperCollins and joined Revolution Studios, a very prominent independent movie studio in LA. Again, in the area of script development. And that's what I've been doing. And I've been working as a freelance editor now for, I don't know, I think 10 or 15 years. My goal is to find the story. And I love my work, and my goal is to make every manuscript commercially viable. That's my North Star.
Yeah, so you clearly understand story and know what goes into one, especially with all this experience, but not just that, but the accolades that you have rightly earned as a result of everything you've done.
Oh, there's more. I won an African Academy Award for
Yes.
Best
See, you've done
Documentary.
so much, you forgot something.
I had a great time making a movie in South Africa and won an African Academy Award, and it was a great experience. I also didn't mention that I have a book called Ordinary Life in Three Acts.
Mm-hmm.
It is available on Amazon. It's a collection of a lifetime of poetry, and it's really about ordinary life. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the art of ordinary people. I'm interested in the writing of ordinary people. In uh, I'm interested in things that move ordinary people.
And how do you think this interest in ordinary people helps you when you're looking at a manuscript, such as being able to pick out when dialogue works or doesn't work, or when the emotion resonates or when it falls flat?
Well, it's a good question, and I don't know that I can give you a very good answer. I mean, most people, if they're reasonably alert and reasonably awake in their own lives, can tell when somebody's not really being honest or they're kind of obfuscation. You have an instinct, not everybody, I grant you that, but you read certain things and you just like, that doesn't sound right. I don't know. That character is, you develop an instinct for it. And so, well, I've been listening to people talk for, my entire life, and you just know when things just don't resonate. And that's really what you listen for. Would that character really say that in that given situation? Nah, let's talk about that. And that's what I do. I don't, again, as I said, I don't make any decisions. It's not my place, but I do ask a lot of questions. We spend time on the phone. Typically, the way it works is that I will give a one-page report, coverage it's called in industry, and it's a kind of a top-down view. I don't enter the manuscript, so to speak. I'm still an observer, and I ask a lot of questions. What said, and does this really make sense? And why would this person do this? And I engage with the writer, and then submit my coverage. They have a half-hour conversation with me, and then they're free to do whatever they want. There's no further obligation to me, but they often come back based on the conversation that we had and based on my notes. They'll come back for a second iteration, and we'll go through the whole thing again. If there's a third iteration, then it becomes a line edit, and I'm prepared to do that. But the first edit, the first pass is really developmental, and as I said, there's no obligation. The writer can do whatever they want. I don't know what else to say. Really, I like working with writers. They're very quirky. They're very egotistical. Take certain special handling.
Well, going back to emotion and dialogue, why do you think believable speech helps immerse the reader in the story?
Well, the answer to that is fairly simple. It has to do with acceptance, I think. I mean, again, this is not true for everyone. And I don't mean to suggest that life is sort of black and white, but you have to be willing to engage with the characters. You have to be willing to accept them. That doesn't mean you have to like them, but there's that's what I call the suspension of disbelief. And what I mean by that is everybody knows that Superman can't fly. Okay, that's a given. So you don't say, oh, that's ridiculous. He can't fly. I'm not going to watch this movie. You accept it. You suspend your disbelief because that's the deal. That's part of the deal. Superman can fly. End the story. And you go along with the story because you accept that. You suspend your disbelief and you go along with the story. And that's really where emotion and dialogue come in because they have to resonate. They have to resonate with people. Now, you could say, well, everybody's different. Well, that's true. And that's why there's no one universal answer to that question. But that's why reading dialogue out loud is so important because the characters need to resonate. I mean, I'm sure anybody who considers themselves a reader has stopped reading after X point because it's like, well, I know this is ridiculous. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's That's why my website is called The Fickle Gods of Publishing. I mean, that's very, very purposeful because there are, and again, this is true for movie scripts as well. There are so many scripts and so many manuscripts floating around the atmosphere. And you just never know. You never know what's going to work. And and I say this to my writers all the time. I spent 7 years working on a screenplay with a co-writer. We weren't able to sell it. It was very disappointing. I think it's a great screenplay, but that's the nature of the business. That's the nature, not even the nature of the endeavor. You take your best shot. Another thing that I always point out to writers is if you look at the back page, it's usually the back page of a book where the acknowledgments come in. The writer is similar in the sense to a mother giving birth, in the sense that the writer is the only person who can write the book. The mother is the only person that can have the baby. But if you look in the hospital room for delivery, there's like 10 people in there doing whatever they do. Well, the same is true for a book. If you read the acknowledgement page, I'm reading a book now that it's something like 50 names on the acknowledgement page because a lot of people were involved. I don't know how, but they're all acknowledged by the writer. And it's important to remember that editors are important. But they perform a function. So that's what I do. I read. Really, I love books. I love the English language. Um, I'll send you a copy of my poetry.
Oh, thank you.
I'd be happy to. If you just send me a good email address, I'll send it to you. The poetry is, I mean, if people who have known me all my life, and I have quite a few people, friends over, 60 and 70 years, that's how they know me. They know me as, I was a poet.
Oh, great. Especially since with high school and that award and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I have this book and I wasn't really able to do much with the book. I'm just not very good at self-promotion. I'm really just, I
No, me
love
either.
I love what I do. I love the language and, let me do my work is how I feel. Let me do my work. And if I can help you, I will do everything possible to help.
So, since you've worked in so many different mediums, I'd like to ask you, how do you see emotion playing a part in poetry versus a full-length novel versus a screenplay? And are there different ways to bring it about effectively?
It's a difficult answer. I mean, I can answer it, but my it's a completely different medium for me. I read poetry. I subscribe to the New Yorker magazine, and there are at least 2 or 3 poems in the magazine every week, every issue. The magazine's been around for 100 years. It's very, very, very reputable. I can't finish a single poem. I read them because I feel like I'm obligated to read them because, us poets, we have to stick together or some nonsense like that. And I can't finish them. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you can read the English language, you will understand my poetry. Period. End of story. I have no need to shine. I want to touch people in a place where they live. And that's really what my poetry is about. Now, that's a different story. That's like my book, my poetry. But when it comes to movies and it comes to novels, you have to make it credible. There's got to be a level of credibility. And how you do that is different in every book. But to me, it has to do with the motivations of the characters and how they express those motivations, those desires. What do they want to do? And what's preventing it? What prevents, and again, that goes back to the simple formula of conflict and resolution. That's really the heart whatever it is, that's to me, that's the reductive part of all literature. What's the conflict and how are you going to solve it? So you're writing your story, it has to, you've got to follow, again, it's not written in stone, but Aristotle's 3-act structure is a very, very basic part of any creative endeavor. And it's not written in stone and you don't, but it's very, very logical in the way that it plays out, where first you establish your characters and you basically establish the conflict, which according to Aristotle is 25% the setup. And then Act 2 is 50%, roughly, the drama around the confrontation to solve the conflict. And then the third act is the resolution. And that's basically the formula for just about every, again, I don't want to say everything because nothing is everything.
Right.
But that's basically how it works. And you've got to develop your characters. You have the writer needs to understand what a character arc is, to understand that the characters are not the same at the end of the book that they were at the beginning. And there's got to be growth. But again, to me, the most important thing, most important thing, and how you develop it is utterly different, has to do with credibility. If I mean, it's really easy to close a book off and just put it down. It takes a little more effort to walk out of a movie theater, but not much. You've got to keep people engaged. You've got to tell the truth. Somehow or another, you have to tell the truth. The truth has to be relevant to your characters and to your story, but you need to tell the truth and you need to tell it as honestly as possible.
Well,
I think that's really critical.
mm-hmm. Before we end, do you have any last bit of advice for listeners who might be preparing to write their own manuscript or who want to improve their writing skills?
Well, I mean, the most basic advice I would give is don't give up. As simple as that sounds, the temptation to quit, and that can be true of anything. I mean, anything that's difficult is difficult by its nature, by definition, and so there's always an element that says, I can't do this, I want to make it out. And some writers will spend, really years and years and years. These are the rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make the rules. This is how it is. And if you're going to dive into this pool, you're going to get wet. I mean, it's that simple. Just keep going. And when I heard this said, it may be apocryphal, but when the writer is ready, the editor appears. I've heard that. And I don't know, maybe that's
It makes us sound like fairy godparents.
Yeah, something like that. Well, you never know. But it's just important, that ego will produce the book, but humility will finish it.
Oh, that's good.
I just made that up.
Oh, brilliant. That's quote worthy. Well, thank you. And thank you for such an entertaining and insightful conversation.
I hope that you are well. I hope that your dog is well. And let me know if you need any embellishments or anything at all.
All right.
Really easy to find.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. And be sure to check out the show notes for more information about today's episode. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this one, please don't forget to subscribe to the show. And I hope you'll listen again next week. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.